The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birth dates for the draft. Here at Selective Service Headquarters in Washington is CBS News correspondent Roger Mudd.
Good evening. It was 29 years ago that the first and most famous lottery number, 158, was drawn as the United States entered World War II. Tonight, for the first time in 27 years, the United States has again started a draft lottery. And the famous first pick tonight is September 14th, the first birthday that now is designated 001, which means for 19-year-olds born on September 14th, that beginning in January, local draft boards will induct those men born on September 14th, barring deferments. The next birthday in order, April 24th, and so on down the line this evening.
Pursuant to the executive order, the Director of Selective Service is going to establish tonight a random selection sequence for induction for 1970.
Hey there, Kirby. What's happening back in the world? You hadn't heard during my second tour.
Fire in the hole!
We spend most of our time living in the bush. Kinda numb to everything out here. Trying to keep my head clear. Our lieutenant is this crazy white boy named Duke and from Ohio. He's good at getting us out of crazy situations. We got this one wild-ass brother out here named Cleon.
Fuck.
His daddy's this big-time preacher, but you never know from his crazy son.
Now you're good. Now Jesus loves you.
He's from Mount Vernon. Oh yeah, you won't believe it, but Skip volunteered for my unit. I don't think he's cut out for recon. He's always getting high and shit, trying to keep his mind off things. Me, just trying to take it one day at a time and do what's right. Whatever that is. See you when I get back to the Bronx. Anthony.
Please stand up as a Marine and stand up for America. No one wants to fight for Israel. Oh my God. Oh my God.
U.S. boots on the ground's looking like a real possibility right now. Hegseth just approved a request from Central Command for a Marine Expeditionary Force. That's around 2,500 Marines, several warships, and the amphibious assault ships that you'd need to actually get troops onto a shore. Now, Marines, they've already been involved in this conflict, but the difference here is that an Expeditionary Force exists for one purpose: to invade. And the timing here matters because it comes after Iran successfully shut down the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off oil for much of the world, and after Trump admitted that Iranians probably aren't going to rise up against the regime like he had hoped. And one possible target is Karg Island, where Iran ships out 90% of its oil. But also, if U.S. troops enter Iran, it completely undermines Trump's messaging that the war will end soon. Though he's already walking that back by saying that he'll, and this is a real quote, feel it in my bones when the war should end. That's it. That's how the President of the United States is deciding the goals and timeline of a war. Vibes. So in the meantime, follow to stay in the loop.
The president has made the official announcement of his executive order to re-implement the draft. The 1.3 million active duty troops in the U.S. and almost 770,000 National Guard and reserves just wasn't enough. You were already registered under the Selective Service System, or SSS, just like all American males aged 18 to 25 by law. You were well aware that if the president and Congress demanded, you could be asked to serve your country in a crisis. You just didn't think that it was actually going to happen. The draft is only for males, but there's been serious talk about new legislation under the National Defense Authorization Act. The polls are saying 61% of women and 59% of men support women being included. Before the draft was announced, almost 80% of Americans said the U.S. shouldn't even have a draft, including you. The next day, you receive an email from the draft board telling you what's going to happen next. The fact that you're supposed to be going to college doesn't get you out of this. Things have changed since the 2.2 million young American men were drafted between 1964 and 1973 to go to Vietnam. Things are now supposed to be much fairer. You can't defer if you're enrolled in college full-time, although they will let people finish the semester. What you do in the military will also largely depend on your educational background, so it's conceivable kids from very wealthy families might not be sent straight to the front, something people are already protesting against all over the country.
During the Vietnam War, the draft was supposed to be random, but if you had money, you had options. You could get a college deferment. You could pay for a medical exemption. You could leave the country. But if you were working class, poor, black, you went. Because this war, like most, wasn't fought by the powerful, it was fought by the powerless.
Donald Trump recalled watching the Vietnam War draft numbers roll in while studying at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. He told Fox 5 New York, "I got a very, very high number, but that high number wasn't the only reason why he never served. After getting 4 deferments to complete his studies, Trump's number actually was called in 1969 after he had graduated from college, but the future president had acquired a medical deferment for bone spurs in his heels. Trump claimed to not remember much about the diagnosis that ultimately led to his medical exemption, but the New York Times put forward a possible answer in 2018. Dr. Larry Bronstein, a podiatrist in Queens, was working at the time out of an office owned by Trump's father, Fred. The doctor allegedly wrote the diagnosis as a favor. One of Bronstein's daughters claimed, "If there was anything wrong in the building, my dad would call and Trump would take care of it immediately. That was the small favor that he got."
The Middle East was supposed to be the next frontier for AI. America's biggest tech companies poured tens of billions of dollars into data centers across the Gulf region and received tens of billions in support from oil-rich nations.
They had access to cheap energy. They had sovereign investment, in these projects. And they also had geographically access to these emerging markets, in Asia.
Then the U.S. and Israel struck Iran, and that AI future suddenly looks less certain.
The U.S. and Israel striking Iran for a third day following the killing of Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Iran hit back, striking 3 of Amazon Web Services' data centers, 2 in the UAE and 1 in Bahrain. It was one of the first times a major cloud provider's infrastructure had been struck in a military conflict.
Prior to the outbreak of this conflict that we are witnessing unfold in the Gulf in particular, the region was viewed as relatively stable. We haven't seen this kind of conflict in the Gulf since the first Gulf War in 1990-91 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
The deal spree was on display during last year's White House tour of the region across Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, with billions of dollars committed from these countries in partnerships with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, OpenAI, Oracle, and others. These tech companies also partner with the U.S. government. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle all hold cloud contracts with the Pentagon. OpenAI is now building the largest data center outside of the U.S. in the UAE and recently signed its own deal with the Department of Defense amid fallout with rival Anthropic. AI and cloud computing is now deeply embedded in the U.S. military, and as that technology gets strategically more important to the military, experts worry these data centers could become more of a target.
As AI becomes more and more integrated into the worlds of business, military, we're actually seeing, a blurring of those lines. It stands to reason that the various elements of AI infrastructure, in particular data centers, are going to be targeted in attacks.
The conflict threatens more than just the safety of those data centers abroad. It also threatens to boost the cost of building them. Crude prices have soared, at one point reaching over $100 per barrel as Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz. The cheap energy that made the Gulf so attractive for data centers is now in question.
Drone strikes, missile strikes, that was not, fed into the calculus as to how to think about constructing these various sites. And so I think it poses actually a pretty significant challenge going forward.
Costs are also rising domestically, and there are some new concerns about the semiconductor supply chain. A prolonged regional conflict could affect key materials like helium and bromine. Those are important in building memory chips. For investors, the big question going forward is whether this increases the total of big tech's already eye-popping spending or just delays it.
Conflict is rarely good for check writers. If you take the case that this conflict goes on longer and energy costs go up, maybe that causes the input costs of these data centers to inch up. Maybe it slows down the speed that they're going to get there. Either way, the equation reads negative.
But it's also giving big tech pause on can they make these long-term investments if things could just change in a snap.